of a debt that is owed. That is what reparations is.
Hi, I'm Sally Quinn, author, journalist, and Washington Post contributor, and today I am really happy to say that we have as our guest Marianne Williamson, who is a spiritual thought leader, a best-selling author, and a former presidential candidate. Welcome, Marianne.
Thank you so much, Sally. It's great to be here with you. Thank you.
Marianne, I remember about 2 years ago we had dinner, and we were chatting, and I said, so what are you up to? What's your next move? And you said, well, actually, I'm thinking of running for president. And I thought for a minute, and I said, oh, well, why not? I mean, Donald Trump ran for president. I don't see why you shouldn't. And, I was startled because that's not what I expected to hear. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought you have a lot of good ideas that haven't been shared with people, and that I think that your message needs to get out. And, a lot of people thought it was a joke at first. A lot of people ridiculed the idea that you were running for president. But guess what? You ended up on the debate stage twice, which is more than a lot of the supposedly serious candidates did. I'm just curious to know, why did you actually run? What made you decide to do that?
I ran because I wanted to talk about things that I feel should be part of our political conversation in the public sphere, things that are not talked about enough. I wanted the opportunity to present those things and the kinds of issues that should be aligned with public policy, I feel, at this time in our history. And I feel these things even more now than when I decided to run. So I feel there was a very legitimate reason for me to run. And the corruption of our political system that has such a narrowly prescribed sense, not only of who should be in the conversation, but also what the conversation should be, is a large part of why we're in the ditch that we are in now. And Sally, you were one of the first people that I did tell that I was thinking about running. And your not laughing at the idea was a big deal for me, as it was for several people that I knew. No one pretended that they thought I would become president, but no one laughed. And I think the laughter began not based on the issues I was discussing, but on the false characterization, the kind of politics of personal destruction that was aimed at making sure I wouldn't make it onto the debate stage the third time. So I think a lot of what's happening in this country right now is revealing some of the shadows of American politics, not only on the issue of policy, but on the issue of the system itself.
I'm going to ask a question from one of our viewers, which I was going to ask, but he beat me to it. Jacques Boyd said, what did you learn from running for president?
I learned two things, and I learned a lot of things, obviously, but two main categories of things, and they seem diametrically opposed. And the extent to which they are diametrically opposed, I believe, is part of the tragedy going on in America today. I learned that the system of running for president is more corrupt than I even knew. And I learned that the intelligence and the decency and the dignity of the American voter is even greater than I hoped. Part of what was sad for me running is that I saw, particularly in the primary states, that the voters are up to the job. They, particularly in those primary states, they knew the issues. They kicked the tires when they talked to candidates in all the ways that they should. And if the party establishments would just get out of the way and let democracy happen, it's pretty amazing what the people of the United States would bring forth. So I saw both sides. I saw the shadows and I saw the light. And so I leave the experience, as brutal as it was also exhilarating, and I am left with an even greater excitement and dedication and clarity about the purposes and the power of democracy, as well as even greater concern that we must get rid of all obstructions to the will of the people really being heard in the political process.
You were in debates. You obviously watched the debate with Donald Trump the other night. Did that make you feel excited about democracy?
I am very, very concerned about the threat that he represents to our democracy. And I, in a way, if there's anything good about that debate the other night, it's how many millions of people, particularly, did not truly realize what kind of a person he is. The kind of person that he is, and the kind of politics he represents, was on full display the other night. So, if there's anything good about what happened, it's a lot of people who might, for whatever reason, not have realized that, certainly would realize it now.
Where are we as a country? You've said that there's in a Newsweek column, there's a dark psychic force. Actually, I think you said that on the debate stage. We've got COVID, we've got the election, we've got unemployment, we have racism, we have protests, we have immigration, we have global warming. Next, you talk in the Newsweek column about a cold civil war, and this is a catastrophic moment. What did you mean by that?
A cold civil war is when there's not outright shooting going on, although to some extent, I'm afraid we can't even say that. But in a larger collective sense, there's not outright shooting going on, but it's an underlying warfare, state of warfare, just like we had with the Soviet Union for many years. And what's interesting about the Cold Civil War going on in the United States today is that it is the newest iteration of many of the issues that actually were with us in the 19th century. They're not all that different. Again, the issue of race, etc. Everybody can feel it. And I think that there are two major things to look at. First of all, when I talked about dark psychic force, I was referring to a very serious issue, which we see on full display now. But I was already talking about it then because we should have been talking about it then. And that is the danger of collectivized hatred. What the president has done is he has taken Islamophobia, anti Semitism, racism, bigotry, all of the worst aspects of the American character. And he has collectivized them and harnessed them for political purposes. Now, it's not that racists, bigots, homophobes, anti Semites didn't exist before, but you and I remember a time in America where we thought we had reached a consensus on both left and right, among both Democrats and Republicans in terms of establishment, that such voices as those would not be given serious political megaphone. Those levees have fallen, partly because of social media, and partly because we have a person of no less power and leverage than the President of the United States, who is willing to actually harness those forces for collective purposes. You can go back to the Holocaust, you can go back to Rwanda, we can go back to so many times in history where underestimating the danger of collectivized hatred is foolish. But you can also look at things like the Indian independence movement. You can look at the abolitionist movement, the women's suffragette movement, the civil rights movement. And you can see where collectivized decency, dignity, commitment to democracy, and love for our country and for our great grandchildren is what ultimately prevails. And ultimately, as the quote goes, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it does bend towards justice. So I think that this is a very important time for Americans to read our history. Because if you do read our history, as important it is to identify the problems in our past, I think it's a good time to identify with the problem solvers. We have faced catastrophic assaults on American democracy before. We have the abolitionists pushed back abolition, the suffragettes pushed back institutionalized suppression of women, the civil rights movement pushed back institutionalized suppression of Black people in the form of segregation. It's simply our turn now. Then you get to the second issue you brought up, which is our generation is not particularly psychologically and emotionally prepared for the job at hand. We never had to cut our teeth on anything tough before. We've had a very prolonged post-adolescence. It could be argued that we had 9/11, but what were we told to do? We were just told to go shopping. We weren't told to sacrifice anything. So whereas someone like my mother's generation, the bombs dropped on Pearl Harbor, And there was an understanding our democracy is under assault. And people immediately went into a psychological, intellectual, and emotional alignment with the job at hand and what needed to be done. And that's where we're all grappling. People are rising up. I do think there's an awakening going on. But a lot of people, there's a whole spectrum on how prepared people feel to take on this moment. How we show up in the next 30 days will have a lot to do with whether or not we pull off the biggest battle, which will be on November 3rd. But no intelligent observer thinks that it's going to be over on November 3rd, no matter who wins the election.
Well, that brings me to a question I wanted to ask you about despair. There's been a lot of written about people being in despair, and there's a figure out 83% of the people in this country are totally stressed on both sides. There's a Greek word, asedia, which is seizing up or freezing of feelings. And the question is it good to be able to identify your feelings? Can it help? Can it move us to action? You said that at one point something beautiful happens to people who have fallen apart. And you also said, and you said this to me the other day, that it's time to pull out of this, that is enough with calling out our despair. So what do we do? What's the antidote to this despair? I mean, there are 4 weeks left to go. What is everybody supposed to do? And after, we need to be longer.
Yeah, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. I have had a 37-year career, Sally, working up close and personal with people in crisis. People don't usually come to me because things are going well. So, and I've lived my own life. So I have seen a very interesting pattern. When people are told you have cancer, your child is addicted to heroin, you're going bankrupt, your spouse is leaving and you didn't expect it, I've seen something very interesting that happens. And that is that meaningless preoccupations that normally dominate our day-to-day existence fall away in the first 5 minutes. And that's sometimes when people find out how smart they are. You hear you have cancer, yeah, you cry, and then you want to hear what the doctor recommends. How are we going to deal with it? You hear that your child is addicted to heroin, yeah, you cry, and then you talk to the rehab people. What are we going to do, and where do we have to send him or her? So sometimes we find our strength. I also felt that was part of the legitimacy, some people feeling it was the illegitimacy of my candidacy, because the fix, the transformation that is going to help us navigate this period in our history and truly get to the calmer waters on the other side is a kind of holistic political perspective. It's not just on the level of the externals. The level of the external breakdown is a consequence of many things internally that led to this. Our chronic political disengagement, our chronic distraction. And that, I feel, is an important message for the people of America. Donald Trump did not come out of nowhere. This has been an accumulating layers of horror by which we basically surrendered what Thomas Jefferson said was the core of American democracy. He said that the only safe repository for power in the United States is in the hands of the people. Our power was not just taken from us, we surrendered it, because being an active citizen takes energy. And there were too many things to take our attention elsewhere. And so I think that we all now have to realize no crisis in our personal lives or collectively is convenient. Pearl Harbor wasn't convenient, but it's here. And when people tell me how traumatized they are, I always say, Sally, do you think the people who walked across the bridge at Selma were not traumatized? They didn't know if the police were going to send out the dogs, the hoses, or even bullets, but they walked. You think the women suffragettes who got thrown in prison for no other crime than having marched for women's suffrage, and the conditions in the prison were so awful that they went on a hunger strike, and the response of the prison officials was to send men into their cells with these metal contraptions to force feed them. You think they weren't anxious I'm tired of this, Sally. American women are not porcelain dolls. And we've had too many men in America acting like boys, too many women in America acting like girls. Of course, we're all scared. Of course, we're all desperate. The assault on our democracy, the thieves of our democracy are at the door. And we have millions of Americans who would actually invite them in. You know, it's like we all have to slap each other across the face, get some cold water, cry, scream into your pillow, and then get out there and kick ass because this election is on November 3rd.
Well, it's not just hyperbole, but people say that it's taking it too far. Well, I guess that's hyperbole, but that also it's too easy to say that this is like Nazi Germany. And yet you hear it on both sides. You hear the right-wing people talking about the mask Nazis. And I remember living in Germany twice, and once after I graduated from college, and I dated a lot of German guys, and I had many German friends, and so did my parents. I was there for 2 years, and they were all wonderful people and great friends. And I came away with the feeling this could happen in our country because they were just like us. They weren't different from us. The younger ones, my friends, were, of course, horrified by what had happened. The older ones were apologetic, and none of the older ones had ever fought on the Western Front against the Americans. They'd all fought against the
don't really know what you're saying.
But so you do see the similarities between this and I mean, have we passed Kristallnacht yet?
Well, we've not had Kristallnacht, thank God, although we've had a lot of little Kristallnachts. I mean, some of what's been going on in Portland, some of what's been going on in Seattle. We've had little baby mini Kristallnachts. Thank God we've not had a Kristallnacht. Let's not even put it in the air. However, let's remember everything that the president is doing now is what he's doing while being held back. You give him a second term, especially with Bill Barr at his side, there is nothing to hold him back. You know, a lot has been said, particularly among Jews. We grew up asking our parents, how could it have happened? We're not asking that anymore. We're no longer in the stage of it could happen. We're in the stage of it is happening. And it is incumbent upon us. The way I see it, Sally, it's 11:55 and it's not midnight yet. And this goes back to what you were saying before. We have to transform our despair into a very, very serious, you will not get my democracy. Not on my watch. It is a characterological, we all need more courage. I can't say all. Obviously, everybody knows where they are. I think a lot of us, we're good people. We are dignified people. A lot more people in this country are decent and dignified and loving than there are haters, bigots, etc. But those who are hateful and bigoted and racist and anti-Semitic and etc., they are convicted right now. And conviction is a force multiplier. So there are a lot more lovers than haters, but we need to be as convicted behind our love and behind our commitment. You will not get our democracy. We're serious about this liberty and justice thing. We're serious about criminal justice. We are serious about racial justice. We are serious about our democracy. We are serious about earth justice. We are serious about gender justice. And we had become lazy. We had lost what is it de Tocqueville called the habits of democracy. We must awaken now. It is a political awakening. And what's very important is that we must never go back to sleep. If anything, there'll be a lot of changes after this. As soon as this man is out of the White House, there are going to be some big changes, including changes having to do with executive authority. That's a given. But there has to be changes in each and every one of us, or this stuff will be back. These are symptoms that simply morph. And we were naive. And we were irresponsible and immature to some extent as a collective to ever think we could rest and just assume democracy, a vital democracy, a done thing, and turn it over to the lawyers. That's not the system that our founders established. And so now I believe that what's happening, and I think that we'll be ready for this, we must make active citizenship simply a facet in our own sense of ourselves of a meaningful, well-lived life. And,
Marianne, you talk in your book, your best-selling book, Return to Love, you talk about seeing the good in others. You talk about love and forgiveness. Can you feel those things for Donald Trump? You say you must pray for somebody's happiness for 30 days. And I wonder if you pray for Donald Trump, and has it helped our country? How can you pray for someone who you feel this strongly about.
I understand.
Someone who you know, does it alleviate your anger and your toxicity? Because obviously, you know, if you're praying for somebody and you're praying and you want to forgive them, you know, it's easier, as you said, to bless someone than to blame them. So how do you deal with those feelings when you have such strong feelings about Trump and about what's happening in this country and about the Republicans?
Martin Luther King Jr. said, God said I have to love my enemies. He didn't say I have to like them. And as any parent knows, sometimes love says no. The fact that I love my child doesn't mean I say, oh, okay, you're a baby, but you can play with scissors. It doesn't mean I'll tell a teenager you can go do whatever you want when I know drugs and alcohol and crystal meth's going to be at that party. Sometimes love says no. The fact, you know, so listen, when I lived in New York, Sally, the first day I got there, I looked out my window and I realized the Trump Tower was outside my window. But I laughed. I knew it was like, okay, Marianne, you have a choice here. Every time you walk through your living room or your bedroom, you can send him judgmental attack thoughts or you can bless him. And you know what I learned? Personal anger doesn't help. Personal anger as a motivation for political activism is like white sugar. It gives you an adrenaline high and then you crash. This is a marathon. You need healthy food. And personal anger at Republicans, personal anger at Donald Trump does not help. You know, one of the things that you know, I'm a student of sorts of World War II, and one of the things that I find fascinating is how adult and mature Roosevelt, Churchill, Eisenhower. You know what how he described the Nazis? Those unworthy men. They didn't go yelling. They just got the job done because it needed to be done. And that's how I see it. God bless him. I understand he is an innocent child of God, but no, he cannot have our democracy. No, not going to happen.
That goes for the religious right too. Do you think that they follow your prescription for love?
Well, you heard what the Pope said the other day. I am a religious woman, but I don't have any illusions about the condition of institutional or organized religion in America, and that goes for all religions. So I love. Someone said about Abraham Lincoln. One of his friends said he's so religious he's beyond religion. So when I think of genuine religion, I think of the spiritual path of the heart, which for some people is centered within a religious institution, but for some people isn't. You know, God shall not be mocked means he's not. There are many people, particularly today in America, who hate in the name of God. Obviously, Muhammad Atta, the last thing he said before he would slit someone's throat was, God is great. So God sees through that, and so do we.
So what do you think Trump represents spiritually in this moment? And do you think that there is a swing between the establishment that we have, the darkness and the light, enlightenment? You know, some people say that it's cyclical. We go from bad to good, from good to bad. But do you think that this is a different moment now?
This is catastrophic. I think this is the worst thing since the Civil War. We should not underestimate how perilous this moment is. But when you ask me, what does he represent? He's a symptom of that said. But I believe in the law of cause and effect. I believe in the law of karma, which is the law of cause and effect, just stated within an Eastern religious context. How, you know, everybody's scared today. Well, how do you think those people felt in Baghdad? How much time did you spend thinking about the invasion of Iraq? How much time did you spend thinking about the fact that men, women, and children who had done nothing to harm us in a country that had nothing to do with 9/11? That even if they had weapons of mass destruction, we do business with countries that have weapons of mass destruction every day. How much attention did the average American give to what was going to happen to those men and women and children who could not protect themselves or their children when American bombs were raining down on Baghdad? Americans have been distracted from things we should have been thinking about. I believe we're a good and decent people. I believe that the average American does try to live a decent life. I do. But we have divorced ourselves, and the political establishment has found it convenient that we've been divorced from really taking into serious consideration whether or not American policy, domestic policy and foreign policy, is decent. You know, a lot of those people, a few minutes ago, you talked about people you know who think that it's hyperbole. How many of those that you were describing are Black people who are literally afraid to drive because they might get stopped for a tail light being out, and God knows what might happen next? How many of those people that you described as saying, oh, this is hyperbole, are people who are out on the streets every night in the likes of Portland for peaceful protest and getting tear gassed by federal agents who clearly are not under any level of leadership by the mayors or the governors who've already said that they don't belong there. So,
Mary,
yeah.
we have only a few minutes left, and I wanted to ask you, if you were advising Joe Biden right now, what he should do in the next little over 4 weeks. How should he go about winning this campaign?
Well, of course, in terms of his platform is his platform. I can't, I don't understand why they're doing more to attract moderate Republicans than they are to attract progressive Democrats. Throw us a bone, Joe. Throw us a bone. It could be legalized cannabis. I know you're not going to go as far as Medicare for all. You're not going to go as far as some things, but don't diss Bernie. Don't make it such a big deal that you're not that. Include progressives and include these kids, these young people who, when they thought of Bernie Sanders, it was literally for them, in their mind, the only way they would ever have a chance at paying off their college loans, the only way they would ever have a chance at getting health insurance. Show some respect. These are our own children. Talk to the young people of America. Give some progressives some acknowledgement. These people, particularly the Bernie voters, they worked within the system. They did everything they were told they were supposed to do. We cannot afford another election where too many Democrats stay home. We can't afford it.
And do you think that would help him win?
Pardon?
Do you think that would help him win if he did that?
We have 30 days. We have about 30 days. Just do it now if I was advising him and if he asked. But I think there's a reason. Well, yeah. I said throughout my campaign, Sally, that the only way to defeat big lies is with big truth. And the Democrats come across with too many half-truths. We need to tell it like it is. Our economy is rigged. Our political system is rigged. We have 93 million people who were living near poverty even before this happened. We have a bailout during this pandemic, which is more of a corporate bailout than a people's bailout. We have the assault of neo-fascism at the door. We have millions and millions of Americans, not only who do not have health care, but have no idea how they'll ever pay off their college loans, who do not know how to go to college. And we need to say the Democrats will fix that. That's how win the election.
I would love to hear more, and we could go on and on. It does sound to me, though, that you're probably thinking of running for president again, or at least getting involved in politics. But I wish you well, and thank you so much for a really enlightening conversation.
Well, I adore you, Sally. I look forward to many more conversations with you, whether it's online or on your back porch. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. I want to thank you so much for joining us, the audience, today. And if you'd like to watch highlights of the full interview from today, please head over to the WashingtonPostLive.com. I'm Sally Quinn, and thank you so much for watching.